This is Brandy Shantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today, I'm here with Heather Boughey. She is a Crohn's patient, inflammatory arthritis.
Arthritis.
I'm losing all my head right now. Patient, and has just been battling with this since '98. So, welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully, I don't forget one more word, but I'm sure it'll happen. I've got the lovely brain fog, as I'm sure you're.
Medicine brain.
We've all lived through it. Just having a little bit of a flare. It's all right. So you were diagnosed with Crohn's disease, you said in July of '98 with an
Yes.
ER visit. So how did that go?
Um, I had dealt with weird abdominal pain for, I don't know, from age 16, 17 on. I did have endometriosis, so that caused some of the abdominal pain. As a child, I've always had GI issues. Even as a baby, I apparently would throw up on anyone who picked me up or moved me. So I've always had weird stuff. I was on ulcer medicine in sixth grade. So they thought maybe there was something, going on with my gut, but, kind of was like, it's Heather's weird gut. I'd been two prior ER visits and was sort of kind of poo-pooed, with some GI issues. And they were like, it's okay. Gave me the lovely cocktail of, Maalox and everything to drink at the hospital
Mm-hmm.
and sent me on my way. I wound up having some horrible GI issues. Went to actually a friend at work drove me to the ER. It was a Friday night, got admitted. They told me that I probably, just doing blood work and a stool sample, probably had Crohn's, toxic megacolon, or or colon cancer. But
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't know until Monday till they could do the colonoscopy. Apparently they don't do them on the weekend. So that was a very long weekend
Yeah.
figuring out what was going on. And then I was diagnosed on the Monday and Crohn's disease, which I had never heard of and knew absolutely nothing about and did not have a smartphone with me. So I was calling friends and, some family with computers saying, hey, figure out what you can, print it to me so I can read it. I had a wonderful GI doctor who explained a lot to me, but I am an information person. So I wanted to read everything I could. It was, since then, I'd not heard of a single person with Crohn's disease back in '98. Now, 25 years later, it's amazing how many people I do know that have it.
Right.
So I don't know if it's increasing, if people are just becoming more aware or what, but it's, and I
Well,
seem to have become
certainly.
the expert with friends who
Right.
are like, my son was just diagnosed. Can you talk to him?
Well, we've come a long way since 1998. I have read that, the diagnosis of Crohn's disease is going, well, all IBD has been going up, but we've come a long way. And even being diagnosed in 2013, it took years to get my diagnosis. Years. It was insane. They kept telling me everything under the sun that wasn't Crohn's disease. And so I'm sure that this, 1998, you definitely had a different experience than I did. As a matter of fact, you said you were one of the first people to go on Remicade
Yeah.
for your Crohn's
TN,
disease.
I actually looked it up prior to talking with you because I was, wanting to TNF inhibitors. August of '98, a month after I diagnosed, was when they were
Wow.
first approved for use. So when I was first diagnosed, I was taking upwards of 30, 40 pills a day between, prednisone comes in 5 mg. So you're taking
Mhm.
a handful of those when they have you on, 60. Acetylcholine 6-MP. That was sort of the cocktail that you took of meds. And the doctor just said it was a balancing act of my symptoms versus how many pills I wanted to take in a day. Um, so when, late '98, he came to me and said, we have an infusion that's called Remicade. It's extremely expensive, but your insurance covers it. So, would you like to try that? So definitely sign me up. I'm tired of, I'm 26 years old or whatever at the time and, lugging around a bag full of pills because
Right.
it was morning, lunch, and dinner was not fun. And then also being on sky high prednisone and then taking sleeping pills because if not, I was bouncing off the ceiling at 3 in the morning or
Yep.
cooking macaroni and cheese and heating up chicken in the middle of the night so I could eat from the cravings you get.
Hmm.
So when I started on Remicade, the theory was give it to the patient as needed. So there was no set schedule as all the TNF inhibitors have now. So, I'd have it maybe once, twice a year. And that kept it, going pretty well. Later found out that the sporadic use of Remicade gives you a greater risk of reaction. So after I was off the Remicade for a bit, back on meds because I had switched doctors, because my favorite doctor left and moved, unfortunately. When I went back on Remicade, they explained to me that I had a higher chance of a reaction to it. So before I even got the Remicade, they would pre-medicate me with Benadryl, some other things. They had to slow my titration, so it would take me 8 hours to get my Remicade infusion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 6 to 8 hours was my typical infusion. I was able to be on it for about 2 years on the regular schedule. However, my last infusion, my blood pressure dropped to 70 over 40.
Oh,
So yeah, they were like, get out of the chair, start walking, move, do something. And was told that, I can't do Remicade anymore. And I was kind of sad because that really helped a lot. So that's when I switched back to, or switched over to Humira, which I was on for 8 years.
hmm.
That lost its efficacy. And now I'm on Cimzia. So,
So you've done all the TNF inhibitors, really?
yep. Yes, been working. Well, and it's a catch-22 with me because with the inflammatory arthritis, the TNF inhibitors helps both the Crohn's and the inflammatory
Hey,
arthritis. If I switch to a Stelara, one of those that is specific for the Crohn's, we're not sure if that's going to affect
the
the
arthritis.
arthritis, which I
Right.
have really bad. I get horrible inflammation. So, in talking to my rheumatologist, who I adore, actually like her better than my GI doc, um, she's monitoring me closely and then trying to, if Cimzia stops working, or which eventually probably will, um,
Yes.
what options we'll be looking at for me then.
Yeah.
So, not happy I'm on a TNF inhibitor, but it's what's working best for me.
Well, that's what it's about, right? I won't go back to it after the severe
Obviously.
reaction I had, but our entire lives are just a balancing act of what are our symptoms right now and how badly do we want to get rid of them so that we can go to work, see our family, get out of the bathroom for an hour, all of those things.
And I will say, my point of view has, as I've gotten older, I turned 51 this summer, which still is not old, but
No,
when
congratulations.
you're when you're 30 and you're like, it's got a black box warning, it might shave some years off at the end. When you're 30, you're like, okay, that's fine. I want the quality of life. 20 years down the road, you're like, let me think about this. I still want the quality of life, but don't particularly want to shorten it with a bad reaction. So,
No, you're right. And you do. I mean, I was the exact same. I don't, the first time I was put on Humira, all I really cared about was I was getting off the 6-MP, which was thinning my hair, and off the prednisone, which made my face blow up to 10 times its usual size. And
mhm.
I believe I was in my late 30s, because I was diagnosed later. And that's all I cared about. I was like, oh, I get to go back down to my regular weight and get my hair back. Fabulous. And of course, yeah, now I'm like, oh, things are already breaking. Do I really want to live the rest of my life with
Yeah.
MS? No.
Yeah, you do start to look at it differently through the years.
Whole different lens, whole different lens. I always like to say to people, I'm like, you know what, at my age, nobody's really worried about how pretty I am anyways.
I've been married 27 years. He's seen me, through
Mhm.
all my meds and all my changes. So that's not a concern as much anymore.
Not even for a second. I tell you what, I've talked about this before with people. When you have a good spouse or a good friend, a good caretaker, that's worth everything right there because,
Yes.
you know, when you first get married, there's no way of knowing that that person's really and truly going to be there through sickness and health. But when you're a Crohn's patient, and he or she's still around and helping you out, you're like, yeah, this is where it's at.
I've often occasionally had to explain to friends. My husband is wonderful. Um, there's times where like I've rushed to the ER and he shows up an hour or two later because of work. It's not out of any not
Mhm.
caring. He's totally used to the drill. He
Yep.
knows I'm going to be in there. I'm going to have testing. I might have pain meds and be a little loopy. Like, he knows the drill. The one morning we tease about it. I get kidney stones because people with Crohn's absorb different, um, and it can cause kidney stones. And the one morning I got up and the kidney stone hit, and I'm like curled up in a ball on the bedroom floor for a second, trying to catch my breath. And John walks in and just looks at me and goes, "Guess I'm calling in sick to work today." You know,
Yep.
just, most people would be like, "Oh my God, are you okay? You're curled up on the floor." And it wasn't a knock on
Yeah.
him that he said this. It's just, they get used to it. It just becomes part of the routine. And
Stand
I
up.
appreciate that because I couldn't deal with someone who'd be like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" He knows I'm in pain. Leave me alone. Just, you do
Well, no,
what you need to
exactly.
do and we'll go to the hospital.
I don't even need to tell my husband what we need to do.
Yep.
Somehow, somewhere along the way, as I'm on the floor in pain, there's already been a call to the ER. They're expecting me. He's got the car up and running.
Hmm.
He's just like,
Yeah.
Franny, just come on. Let's
Yeah.
go. But
Yeah. So a good caretaker doesn't need to be smothering, checking on you all the time.
no,
It's just someone who knows what you need and sometimes knows if you're in pain, you just want to be left
exactly.
alone.
Or you don't want to talk about it. Like I have
Yeah.
Crohn's disease. Please don't ask details.
Yeah. Exactly.
If I'm with another patient sometime, it's like, okay, this is what I saw yesterday and it was not good. But my husband, he's seen a lot, but and I'm surprised he's still attracted to me. But sometimes I would just want to protect him, and he understands that. I'm like, babe, don't come in here. Don't come in here.
Yes. I
Try to be
can
attracted to
definitely
me next.
relate. Yeah, definitely.
Which, talking about the people who love us most, I learned something new from you today because I never had children, so I didn't know how Crohn's would ever affect me going through a pregnancy, and it affected you post birth in a
Yes.
bad way.
Yeah. I was in remission and pretty steady on meds when I got pregnant. And actually, because of the endometriosis and the Crohn's, we weren't even sure, if we were going to get pregnant. Actually, I found out on a Saturday I was pregnant. We were scheduled for our first IVF appointment on Monday. So it worked out very well. Quite surprised, but good surprise. I was in remission when I got pregnant and stayed in remission. Had a very healthy pregnancy, no gut issues. It was like, whoa, I'm not on meds. My gut's acting normal. What am I, 14 again or something? This is awesome.
See, the beginning of
Um,
the story sounds like, yes, get pregnant.
beginning of the story was great. A few, we had message boards back then on the internet. There wasn't Facebook and whatnot. And a few of the message boards from Crohn's, I sort of seen that post pregnancy with the hormone dump that all women experience,
Mm.
your great thick hair starts thinning, all those things, that Crohn's can flare post pregnancy. So it's like, okay, we'll see. Well, yeah, that was 100% correct. I didn't breastfeed Mackenzie, so I could get on my medicines again quickly because they're not really compatible with breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So, and had some judgy people who were like, "Oh, you really need to breastfeed." I'm like, "No, I really need to get medicine back in my
Really?
body. Yeah, it'll be better for her if she has a healthy mom," which, was a little hit or miss. Probably the first 6 months after I gave birth, I was in the hospital cumulatively almost about a month. That's when I started to really have the issues with the inflammatory arthritis
Mhm.
from the Crohn's. It's very depressing when you have a newborn and you can barely get off the sofa to, pick up, hold, move around with your child. Luckily, my husband became a stay-at-home dad after she was born because he had a wife that was having a lot of issues with her Crohn's and a lot of joint issues, and a newborn baby, which
Mhm.
thankfully newborns aren't like toddlers and running everywhere. So that
Oh,
was
yeah.
one helpful thing with him. But yes, postpartum, it was really hard. I had gone to a rheumatologist. Um, because this was, like I said, really when the joint issues started. The first one I went to told me I was just depressed and needed to exercise. Um, I tried to explain, I've read that Crohn's disease, you can have joint issues as, other things, and, got poo pooed and told I'm just depressed. So fired him immediately, never went back, and found a
Always the
wonderful,
best result when somebody says that to you.
yes, found a wonderful rheumatologist who specialized in people who had IBD and IBS.
Mhm.
At Hopkins through a friend who hooked me up, and he was amazing and like explained everything that I was going through, and that it was normal that these, joints hurt, that this was going on, and tied it to my Crohn's. So, and then unfortunately moved to another state again to practice medicine. But was very thankful that, he listened to me, you know, I mean, yes, I was depressed. I couldn't hold my kid, but the depression wasn't causing my lack of
Right.
motivation, It was, you know. So it was, yeah, a little rough the first few months after pregnancy. Sort of why we decided one child was,
Makes
we had
one.
one good, healthy child, and let's not push anything
Yeah,
because
that's all
didn't
that
want to
matters.
risk my body. Yes.
It's a shame that doesn't continue on as like the beginning of the story, because the beginning of the story sounds like,
Oh
oh, you
yeah.
have Crohn's disease, get
Yeah.
pregnant. I
I'm
would
just
love,
gonna get pregnant all the time because this
no
is
meds,
awesome.
intuition, give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that giving birth part that messed it up.
It all goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
At first, when you started talking about it, I thought, well, gosh, I wish I had known you years ago, because Steve and I had talked about, you know, having children, and you just thought, well, with the Crohn's disease, does that even work? And
Hmm.
it does until it doesn't.
Yes, exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's always good to know. It's interesting to me when you talk about the doctor who said, well, you're just depressed. Because I've actually been shocked at the number of doctors who've said the same thing to me. That's not what's causing this, doc.
Yeah.
I am depressed thanks to this issue. Um, and then how many of them don't really address that either?
And you also wonder if it was a guy going in with the exact same
They are the
issues,
same thing. Mhm.
would the doctor look at the guy and say, "You're just depressed"? Yeah.
Exactly.
We
It's
women
the
kind of
same
get the
story
double whammy.
I talk to. Same
Hmm.
story. We all go through the same thing. You're telling this doctor, hey, I have a problem. This is what I'm experiencing. And it's, oh, well, I think you're just depressed, or
Yeah.
you just need to exercise more, or, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I was reasonably depressed. I had this newborn. This is the great time of life, but I could barely move. Like my husband's doing everything, helping me off the sofa, with my joints acting up. So, yeah, you're going to be depressed if you have a baby and you can't, enjoy
oh,
life.
exactly. I mean, what was I supposed to do, doc? You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
um, I spend so much time. I told you, I think, my congressman's sick of hearing from me. But there's just two problems that we can definitely focus on fixing. One, just the lack of doctors. I mean,
Hmm.
we really need to start issuing those visas to foreign doctors, because we're short. I can't get in to see anybody. And then the mental health aspect, I don't, for the life of me, knowing what I know now, why was I not paired with a psychiatrist, psychologist, somebody the millisecond that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease? Of course, I'm depressed.
Yeah. And I've always considered myself lucky, and you, in a sense, we're in an area with a lot of good teaching hospitals,
Yes.
a lot of great resources. I couldn't imagine if, I lived in a state where you don't, I mean, I have Hopkins, University of Maryland, great DC hospitals, all within a 30-minute drive of my house where I live. I have multiple choices. And this is not a knock on community
Uh-oh.
hospitals. They're talking to each other.
The dogs
um,
now know the other one's there.
yeah, this is not a knock on community hospitals or anything
No.
like that. There's some amazing ones. It's just, I always wonder, because I had my best doctors when I was at Hopkins, University of Maryland, the big teaching hospitals. I always wonder, you hear about hospitals closing and things like that in other states, how people do it, when they don't have close by multiple resources. Because I've had to switch doctors, and, we've talked about that, switch around. So, I can't imagine living in an area where your choices of GI doctors are
Are so
limited.
limited. or if you
Hmm.
can even get there.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I remember seeing I love to read. I've always loved to read. And I read something years ago about how the healthcare system in rural areas of America, especially, is just almost non-existent,
Yeah.
and I believe that actually may have been a UN report even because they were, I mean, there's entire areas in the US that the UN has classified as third world.
Hmm.
They don't even have access to a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think it was I can't remember what year. It was the year that my Crohn's was just, oh, I mean, I just could not, it was so bad and I couldn't go anywhere. And normally for Christmas, we would go to the Bahamas because why wouldn't we? But I could not that year because of all the issues I was having. I needed to be somewhere close by so I could get to a hospital. So we just went up to Nemacolin in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and I'll never forget it. We were sitting there, and I'm just complaining about my vacation in Nemacolin instead of the Bahamas. Like, that's a real problem. Third world
Hmm.
problems are not the same as my first world ones, obviously. But there was this poor kid on the news they were discussing who had just died of Crohn's disease. And I thought, my gosh, how does it happen? Well, you just
Hmm.
don't have access to care.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's like I said, I count myself lucky that I live in the area where I live with
Absolutely.
so many resources and good resources.
Very good resources. And sometimes you're two or three deep. When I couldn't get in to see another GI, I got to see one at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in DC.
Hmm.
And then also, I've got another one. So I have two at Walter Reed. So,
Yeah.
very lucky for where we live for certain. But even where we live, I don't know. I've been a little surprised at how we don't just put two and two together. And the second somebody's diagnosed with any, kind of autoimmune disorder or disease, chronic illness, that we aren't immediately referred to a psychiatrist, psychologist. I just find that very interesting because, it's a battle. You're going to be depressed because you can't do the things you normally would, or you're having to make decisions between the drug that could cause MS or not being able to go to work because of Crohn's disease, and
Yeah.
that's a decision it's nothing I would have ever wanted in life. I'll say that.
Yeah. And, as I said, when I was diagnosed, I didn't know anyone else with
Yeah.
Crohn's. So I didn't have a person I could, you know, just
Call.
talk to
Yeah.
easily. And I know there's support groups. I'm an extrovert, but sometimes I'm shy about things. And it was like, not sure I want to jump into the whole support group thing. Not knocking them. I think they're wonderful, but you're
Yeah.
so overwhelmed at first. It was like, I'm not sure. Um, it would have been really nice to just talk to someone. Because at that point in time, I'm like, how does this affect my whole life? I'm 26 years old. What does this look for my life, for having kids, for just, all sorts of things. So, like I said, I have friends whose kids have been diagnosed. Other people have been diagnosed. And, I always, a couple had reached out to me, hey, what would you tell someone newly diagnosed? I'm always happy to say that because it would have been just nice to have the one-on-one when I was diagnosed of someone, besides a doctor, because granted, they do give you advice. I had a great doctor who did, talk to me about everything. But there's just like the personal life questions,
Exactly.
that
That's
someone
why.
has to have had the disease to talk to you about to truly
Absolutely.
understand.
Absolutely. That's why I keep asking everybody. I ask everybody, what do you wish you knew when you were first diagnosed? Because there was just so much that just no one told me. Simple things too. I was I did an interview with a director from the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation a couple of weeks ago,
Hmm.
and we talked about little things that you don't know and nobody thinks to tell you. Like when the doctor says you're in clinical remission, that does not mean the symptoms are all gone. And that just confused me at first. I thought, well, what do you mean I'm in clinical remission? I'm still
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of stuff here, guy. It's just nobody told me about the protections I would have in the workforce either. I just assumed
Yes.
that, thanks to this disease and how much time I had to spend at home because I
Hmm.
couldn't get out of the house, that I was just going to have to do something that would enable me to stay at home. And that's why I changed careers. Nobody ever talked to me about, hey, there's other ways. Let's discuss this.
I once had, I've the last two companies in the company I've worked with for 15 years. I've had amazing supervisors, directors who totally understand my disease and typically not make fun of me, but we joke about it. It's like, oh, it's one of those weird 1% things. Heather's going to catch that because
Yep, yep,
she's had, when COVID first started, and I was like, hey guys, immune system's like jacked up. I'm tagging out early before, our company even shut down. They were like, oh yeah, we totally
yep.
expected you to go hole up at home and, not be. So I have a wonderful company for the past 15 years. It's extremely understanding of it. Um, Back in the early 90s, or I'm sorry, in the early 2000s, I worked for a company, and there was a time where I was in a bad flare up and having issues, and work from home was really tenuous back then, if anything. And
Mhm.
I did, I could go into the office and work for about 5 hours a day, and that was about my max of what my body could handle. And once I started feeling better, I said something to my boss at the time, that, hey, I can go back to 8 hours a day, this and that. And she's like, well, you owe me, like, I don't know, 52 hours. I'm like,
Oh,
well,
wow.
what do you mean? She's like, well, you only work 5 hours a day. You're salaried, but you were here only 5 hours working. So there's, a whole bunch of back hours you owe me. And it was, I'm like, well, federal law, I'm doing the essential parts of my job. I am covered under, a couple different things. And, then she made well, I don't care what federal law says, you still owe me these hours. It's like, okay, so I need to talk to HR about you
Yep.
because, but I was kind of proud of myself for doing that because I was still pretty young and, like,
I think that's
normally I
amazing.
wouldn't have talked back, but it was like, wait a minute. No, this is,
This is
I
not over.
gave you, yeah, I gave you work. I did my job. Like, you didn't understand. It hurts me to come in. Like, I feel like crap and I'm still able to do my job. Um, and I manage commercial real estate. So it's not just a sit at a desk. You're,
Right.
running around buildings, dealing with tenants, things like that. So yeah, no, I was not great at speaking up for myself. If there's one thing Crohn's disease has taught me in life, is to really advocate for myself, either with doctors, with employers, like that one supervisor, um, with techs, even like if I go into the ER on something different, I will. Recently with the kidney stone, they were going to give me tramadol, Toradol, sorry, which we can't have. It's a massive NSAID
Right.
dose. It's great with kidney stones, but it was like, hey, guys, pay attention. I have Crohn's disease, can't have this. Instead of just, oh, yes, doctor's right, I'll, listen. So, advocating yourself is so, so, so important. Informing yourself and advocating yourself and finding doctors who are partners. I have fired a doctor who, a GI many years ago, who, when I told him how I felt, he was like, well, yeah, but. And I'm like, no, I've had this disease a while. I know my signs, I know my symptoms. You've got to be a partner with me in taking
Hmm.
care of this disease, not ignoring what I'm telling you about the disease. So advocating for yourself is really important.
I think that's probably the best lesson to learn, honestly.
Yeah.
And good for you. Know how to stand up and go to HR like that. It's taken me years. It took me years to get to a point to say, you know what? I'm disabled. I'm covered by certain laws. You need to listen to what I'm saying. I know my body. As I've said so many times, I think I've gone numb. I just forget I'm even saying it. Is now I didn't go to medical school, but I know exactly when something's wrong with me. So you need to go back and take another look and see what else we can do here.
Yeah.
It took me a really long time.
Yeah. It does. And you have, you know, also when I was first diagnosed, there wasn't all the extra looking at all the pain meds. It was
Right.
before the Sackler family and all the issues, and that, and they would give pain meds for the Crohn's for when you were
Mhm.
in pain. Um, and I remember once the opioid issues started becoming more prevalent with the doctors. Having one or two ER doctors, I think, thought I was pain med shopping type of thing.
Right.
And,
I have
it's
experienced that as well.
always so frustrating. It's like, no, I know that they come in and say, oh, I have a kidney stone, so I need you to give me this. Like, no, mine's legit. Like, this is legit pain. I swear. And it's frustrating when, they look at you that way. I, tease my husband because, he's been in the ER and hospitals with me many times, and he's familiar with a lot of the pain meds I get. And I've told him, don't mention any pain meds because they're going to think,
Yeah.
I'm here just for that. Like, I know you're doing it because you know which ones work best for me, but don't say anything because I don't want them to think I'm, hospital hopping to get pain meds. Um,
Well, and I believe, I've read about this. I obviously have never been able to see it myself, not being in the medical industry, but I have read that there's now something doctors or some network they can put in there and say,
mhm,
Brandy Shantz, she's in here looking for meds again,
mhm.
and they can actually try to flag you,
Yeah.
which is really frustrating. I understand there's people who are addicted and they are shopping, but
Yeah.
you
Oh, I
know,
know that's an issue, but I get this year I've had 4 kidney stones that have put me in the ER because they've
yeah,
just flattened me out. And, you get nervous also when you go in because
yes.
you're like, are they gonna, this is the fourth time to the same ER. Are they gonna, just wonder about me? So, and there is an issue, I'm not knocking that, but it's
Mhm.
also hard when you have legitimate things and you're trying, because then you start doubting yourself like, oh my God, I look like,
I think the
I'm
same
doing
thing.
this.
Everybody
So
thinks I'm faking it.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
I had to,
that
well,
balancing that with your self advocation, sometimes
it's
you're
hard.
just like, how do I land in this?
I'm always trying to over justify myself. Really, I don't like drugs. I don't like to take
I
drugs.
swear, I handle pain well. If I'm in here saying I'm in pain, it's really high pain. Like, yeah, you do that. I was just doing that. I tore my meniscus over the summer and it's hurting again. And like literally, again, I'm doing the over justification with the
Mhm.
doctor. I'm like, I normally ignore the pain. It's not
Yep,
that bad. But now I'm here because it really hurts right now. Like, you just. You just start babbling on about, I
all the
promise I'm
time,
in pain.
all the time. I got lucky for a while. I was always, when I needed to go to the ER, Steve would just take me straight to Walter Reed. And there was a nurse in the ER that I swear she was always there when I was, and she knew my favorite pain med. She knew all my issues. She could step in for anything. No, no, this is Brandy. She's got Crohn's disease. We're dealing with some extra stuff. We might have an infection. You know, though she doesn't like that pain med, let's give her this one. She was brilliant, brilliant. I miss her because I didn't have to do the explanation thing. She's like, no, no, everybody, back up. I
That
got one.
when I had my hysterectomy, I remember waking up and I was still in pain, and the nurse was saying something to my doctor at the time, and he was like, "It's Heather. You can give her another dose of pain."
We know
And
her.
like,
We know her.
it's all good.
Built up a tolerance over the years.
Yes, exactly. So good doctors are great.
They
They
really
know and
are.
understand you. They're
Oh,
irreplaceable.
I I have cried tears when I've lost a favorite doctor or nurse. Like,
Yes,
no,
he
you can't.
retired last year, and I was like, no, 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 no,
No, no.
no.
I had an amazing
Please.
doctor at Walter Reed that was so good. I'll never forget him. He would call and check on me, and I remember it was during the Olympics of whatever year,
Hmm.
maybe 2016, whatever year was, the Olympics that year. Kathleen Baker won gold in the swim, and she has Crohn's disease. And he called me to see if I was watching,
That's awesome.
and I just thought that was great because he was so proud of me for still being athletic despite having the Crohn's disease. So he was great, but then he was active duty Army, and they promoted him.
You're like, no, no,
I mean,
no.
that man deserved a promotion, but guys, let him
Yeah.
keep being a doctor. He had to go be a manager. I was like, oh,
Yeah. I've had, I guess I've reached that age in the past year. My OBGYN, my primary care, my dentist have all retired. And each of those doctors I've seen probably over 25 years. It was like, oh my God. Even just starting with the primary, it was like the last guy has seen me since I quit my pediatrician, like at age 20. So he has 30 some years of records on me. It was like, how do I start with a new primary care
yeah,
explaining, here's my quirky body
yeah.
and here's all the issues it
I
has
usually start
had.
with get comfortable. We have a story.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, here, sit down, relax. Let me just start at the beginning.
So
So,
I'll ask you. I think your advocacy. I think is just amazing. Being able to advocate for yourself is the hardest lesson to learn,
yeah.
and you know some of it just comes from experience. I think you tell people no, tell the doctor no, you need to do this, but it's difficult, especially if you're not a very assertive person. I always like to tell
Hmm.
people I'm kind of a pushy broad anyways, but um, probably the hardest lesson to learn, honestly, for
Yeah.
most people. But other than that, what's the one thing you really wish you knew when you were first diagnosed with Crohn's?
You know, that it affects your life, and there are times it really sucks, but it's not going to win. I've always tried to stay, in the beginning, it was like, holy crap, I have this disease for forever. Like I said, I wasn't able to Google 8 million sites. I'm just reading all the brochures, was like, am I going to be able to have kids? I was recently, I'd only been married about 2 years. Is this going to affect how I work, my job, like everything? Um, you know, that it would have been great to just hear, yeah, this sucks. And there are days, weeks, clumps of time that are really going to suck. And you are going to have interruptions. But overall, you're going to have a good life. You're going to learn how to work with it.
Yeah.
You're going to learn when you go to the hospital to have your husband bring the cushy toilet paper because you're not
Yep.
used to the single ply at the hospital.
That's right.
You just learn to work with it. I try to keep a really positive attitude. I think it has taught me more empathy. I think
Hmm.
it's taught my daughter growing up watching with a sick parent a lot of empathy about, people with medical illnesses and invisible illnesses. So, yeah, I every now and then I'll allow myself to wallow in a little bit of self-pity because
We're
everyone
allowed.
needs a pity
Yeah.
party. But I just try to, hey, I'm doing okay. You know, I've got a good life. Yeah, my joints hurt, and there's days where it sucks trying to get out of bed, but you know, keep moving.
Yeah. I
So
think that's great. It's always good to end on a positive note. Life can be difficult, but hey,
sucks, but overall,
we're
it's pretty
still
good. Yeah,
we're still living a good life. I like that.
exactly.
Well, thank you, Heather. Really
No,
appreciate you coming to speak with us, and
thank you so much.
hopefully we get you on again another day.
Sounds good. Thank you.